The storm rolled across the plains like a beast unleashed, howling through the empty fields and rattling the wooden fences of the old McCade ranch. The rain was relentless, beating against the earth as if trying to wash away years of buried pain. Underneath that wild sky, a young woman stumbled through the mud, barefoot, soaked, trembling. Her torn dress clung to her like a second skin, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, the distant sound of shouting men faded into the wind. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Her name was Clara Mayfield. 21 years old, orphaned since 16. And for the past 3 years, living in a nightmare. Sold off by a cruel uncle to a saloon owner. She had spent her nights cleaning floors, pouring drinks, and dodging hands that reached where they shouldn't. Tonight, she'd run. She didn't know where her legs were taking her. Only that the lights of the ranch up ahead glimmered through the rain like a promise she didn't deserve. She reached the front porch and collapsed against the door, weakly knocking before darkness claimed her. Inside, Eli McCade, the silent rancher who had lost more than any man should, was sitting by the fire with a cup of black coffee. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one that lived behind his eyes. 2 years ago, he'd buried his wife after a sickness took her too soon, leaving him with a little girl, Abby. Barely 5 then, now 7 and still waiting for her mama to wake up from heaven. Since that day, Eli had spoken little and smiled never. The neighbors called him the ghost rancher, not because he was cruel, but because his heart lived in the past. When the knock came, he almost ignored it. Folks didn't visit at this hour, not in a storm like this. But something, maybe instinct, maybe mercy, made him open that door. And there she was. A broken girl, shivering on his doorstep. Her eyes wide and terrified like a wounded fawn. She whispered through chattering teeth, "Please. Please don't hurt me. I'll work. I can clean, cook. Just please don't send me back." Eli didn't speak at first. He just stared, his jaw tightening as lightning lit her face. Mud streaked her cheeks, blood lined her wrist where rope had once been tied. And fear was carved into every part of her. He could tell she'd been running from more than just men. He didn't ask her name. Didn't ask what she'd done. He only said 3 words that changed everything. "Come inside, home." Clara blinked. She didn't understand. No one had ever offered her shelter without expecting something in return. But the way he said it, quiet, steady, certain, made her legs finally give out. She fainted in his arms. Eli carried her in gently, his hands rough but careful, as if afraid she'd break. He laid her on the couch, covered her with a blanket, and sat in silence. Abby peeked out from behind the corner, her small eyes wide with curiosity. "Papa, who's that?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at his daughter, his last piece of light, and whispered, "Someone who's lost her way." When Clara woke, it was morning. Sunlight poured through the curtains, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filling the room. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. The house was quiet, but alive, the kind of warmth she hadn't felt in years. She sat up, clutching the blanket, unsure if she should run or stay. Then she saw Abby, sitting across the room with a little rag doll, smiling shyly. "Papa said you're safe here," the girl said softly. Safe. The word hit Clara like a prayer. When Eli came in, his eyes met hers briefly. "Eat something," he said, setting down a plate. His voice was low, rough, like gravel, but there was no threat in it. I can't stay," Clara whispered, guilt flooding her chest. "They'll come looking. I don't want trouble for you." Eli shook his head. "Ain't no one finding you here. Eat." For the first time in years, Clara obeyed a man's words without fear, because they weren't a command. They were protection. Days turned into weeks. Clara helped around the ranch, feeding the horses, fixing fences, mending Abby's dresses. She worked hard, never asking for pay, never asking questions. Eli spoke little, but he watched. He saw how she flinched at sudden noises, how her hands trembled when thunder struck. And how she smiled only when Abby laughed. One evening, while repairing the barn, she slipped on a ladder. Eli caught her before she fell, his arms strong around her waist. For a second, their eyes locked, hers full of apology. His full of something he hadn't felt in years. She stepped back, stammering, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean." Eli interrupted quietly. "You don't have to be sorry for breathing, Clara." That night, she cried silently into her pillow, not from sadness, but from the strange, fragile hope that maybe she wasn't worthless after all. As winter approached, life on the ranch softened. Clara and Abby became inseparable, laughing over baking bread and singing lullabies by the fire. Sometimes, Eli would watch them from the porch, the sight tugging at the edges of his guarded heart. One evening, Abby tugged on his sleeve and whispered, "Papa, can she stay forever?" He didn't answer. Not yet. But the world doesn't forget easily. One afternoon, a group of men rode up to the ranch, 3 of them, wearing dusty hats and cruel smiles. The saloon owner's men. They demanded Eli hand Clara over. "She's mine," the leader sneered. "Ran off with my money and my property." Eli's eyes darkened. He stepped forward, towering over the men. "Ain't no woman property," he said quietly. The kind of quiet that made men nervous. The men spat. "You don't know who you're messing with, cowboy." Eli's hand moved to his holster. "No. You don't." What happened next spread across town by sundown. The rancher who never spoke much had drawn his gun. Faster than lightning, warning shots. Nothing more, but enough to send the men riding off like whipped dogs. When Clara saw him standing in the doorway after mud on his boots, rain on his hat, she realized no one had ever fought for her before. That night, as the fire crackled, she whispered, "Why did you do it?" Eli looked at her steadily. "Because no one should beg to be safe." Silence filled the room, heavy and holy. Abby slept on the couch, her little hand clutching Clara's. Clara hesitated, her voice trembling. "I can leave if it's easier. I don't want to be a burden." Eli took a step closer. "You ain't a burden. You're family." Tears blurred her vision. "Family?" He nodded slowly. "You said you'd work to survive. But I don't want your work, Clara. I want you to live." She couldn't hold it back anymore. Years of pain, fear, loneliness, they broke all at once. She fell into his arms, sobbing against his chest. And for the first time since his wife's passing, Eli McCade held someone like he might never let go again. Months later, when spring came, the ranch bloomed with color again. Abby's laughter filled the air. Clara's songs echoed in the kitchen. And Eli, silent as ever, walked among them with peace in his eyes. People in town started talking about the ghost rancher who'd come back to life. No one knew what really happened that night in the storm. But Clara did. She knew that sometimes salvation doesn't come in grand miracles, it comes in 3 quiet words: "Come home." And for the first time, she was home. Truly home.